The afternoon sun was beating down on the parking lot of the supermarket in Glendale, California. The sound of carts pushed over hot asphalt, car doors opening and closing, distant voices of families carrying bags, all common, everything predictable. Margaret Campbell was 73 years old and pushing a cart that was too full, brown paper bags, an egg carton on top, a bottle of detergent almost falling off. She stopped, adjusted the bag on her shoulder, took a deep breath. His hand trembled slightly as he held the handle of the cart. It wasn't fear, it was tiredness, the kind of fatigue that comes after decades of carrying weight alone. She looked up at the sky, clean blue, cloudless. He thought, one more day, thank God. On the other side of the parking lot, a car stopped abruptly, door slamming hard. Sound of police radio cutting through the air. Officer Patrick Dawson got out of the car in a hurry. Impatient look, hand on the belt. He saw Margaret slowly crossing between the cars. She didn't know it, but she was already being watched. Margaret pulled up to her car, an old faded blue sedan. He opened the trunk with difficulty. The key slipped out of his hand, fell to the ground. She bent down slowly, holding the side of the car so as not to lose her balance. At that moment, Dawson quickened his pace toward her. The sound of his footsteps echoed louder than any other noise. Margaret raised her head. He saw the uniform. He felt the weight of his presence before he saw his face. She did nothing, but her body already knew something was wrong. She closed her eyes for a second. He took a deep breath. She remembered her husband, Charles, Navy veteran. He used to say, "Keep calm, Maggie. Always stay calm." She opened her eyes again, slowly, steadfast. It didn't run. He didn't scream. He just waited. Dawson stopped a few feet from her. "Madam, I need you to identify yourself. Now." His voice was rough. No kindness, for no apparent reason. Margaret swallowed. I'm just going home, officer." He stepped forward. "I didn't ask where you're going. I asked who you are." Margaret held the edge of the open trunk. His hands trembled now, but not from fear, of something deeper. She looked at him, directly in the eyes, and it didn't. The parking lot remained noisy around, but between the two of them, the silence weighed like lead. Sometimes the storm starts in the most ordinary place. Margaret Campbell wasn't just an old lady in the parking lot. She was the widow of Charles Campbell, a decorated veteran of the United States Navy. 32 years of marriage. He died 4 years ago, a massive heart attack, on a Sunday morning, just after breakfast. She could still smell the burning coffee that day. Since then, the house has been too quiet, too silent. But Margaret did not complain. He never complained. She learned early on that complaining doesn't change the weight, it just makes it last longer. Every Tuesday and Friday, she went to the same supermarket. I always bought the same things: whole wheat bread, skim milk, seasonal fruits, detergent without fragrance. Nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. Margaret lived like this, invisible by choice, dignified by habit. But invisibility also has a price. Studies show that elderly people alone, especially widows, face greater vulnerability in public spaces. They are easy targets for verbal or physical aggression or institutional neglect. Margaret knew this, even without reading surveys. She felt on her skin every look that crossed her without seeing. But there was one thing no one knew about her. Margaret had one son, Steven. She didn't talk much about him. Not out of shame, out of respect. He lived a different life. Public, intense, dangerous at times. Actor, martial artist, a name known throughout the country. Steven Seagal. Margaret looked at his pictures in the living room from time to time. He smiled discreetly, proud, but without fanfare. She never used his name to open doors. He never asked for favors. She never introduced herself as the mother of. In that parking lot, standing in front of Officer Dawson, she thought about her son for a brief second. She thought about what he would say if he were there. Probably something about control, about breathing before acting, about not letting fear turn into anger. She took a deep breath. The hand stopped shaking. Dawson folded his arms, impatient. "I'm waiting, ma'am." Document. Now. Margaret opened her bag slowly. His hand searched for his wallet among tissues, keys, a small picture frame. She found it. He extended it to him. Dawson took it without looking. He turned his driver's license to the side. He frowned. Margaret. Campbell. She nodded. Yes, sir. He returned the document with a brusque gesture. It doesn't look suspicious here. The phrase came out as an accusation disguised as innocence. Margaret put her wallet back in her purse. He closed the zipper slowly. He looked at the ground for a moment. When he raised his head again, his eyes were serene. She didn't say anything, but something inside her had already decided that she wouldn't give in to fear. In the background, a shopping cart crashed into another. A child laughed out loud. Life went on all around. But there, between her and Dawson, the air was still thick. Dawson took a step back, but he did not move away. He looked around. Other people carrying groceries. No one paid attention to him. No one seemed to care. This made him more comfortable. Power without witnesses always grows too fast. He turned his eyes to Margaret. You took too long to show the document. This is suspicious behavior. Margaret blinked, confused. I was just looking in the bag. Officer. It doesn't matter. You hesitated. And hesitation means something. His logic didn't make sense, but he needed no logic, only authority. Margaret tried to close the trunk. His hands trembled again. Dawson moved closer. It invaded her personal space. Where do you think you're going? Home, sir. I just want to go home. He pointed to the cart next to the car. He left the cart there. He did not return it. This is appropriation of other people's property. Margaret looked at the cart, then to him. I was going to return it now. I always give it back. Too late. He has already characterized the infraction. His voice rose in tone. He knew he was lying, but he also knew that no one would question him. Margaret was alone, vulnerable, invisible, exactly where Dawson wanted her to be. Margaret took a step back, trying to create distance. Officer, please. I didn't do anything wrong. Dawson moved forward. You're reacting. This is resistance. I'm not resisting. I'm just scared. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It should be. And then it happened. Fast. Brutal. Without warning. Dawson raised his right hand and slapped Margaret in the face. The sound echoed dry in the parking lot. Margaret staggered backwards. The side of his face burned. She brought her hand to her cheek. He felt the heat. The pain wasn't just physical. It was moral. His heart raced. Her breathing became short. But she didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stood there looking at him with wide eyes. Shock, disbelief, silent pain. Dawson pointed his finger at her. You reacted to the approach. I saw it. Witnesses saw it. Margaret looked around. There were 2 people nearby, but both looked away quickly. Nobody wanted to get involved. She swallowed the tears that were beginning to rise. I didn't react. I just... Shut up. You are being formally accused of resistance and contempt of authority. He took the radio to his belt. Central. This is Dawson. I need a police report. Elderly suspect. Aggressive behavior during routine approach. The voice on the radio confirmed something inaudible. Margaret felt the world turn. She leaned on the car. His legs weakened. The sun was still beating hard. The parking lot was still busy. Carts being pushed. Children laughing. Engines starting. But for Margaret, everything had stopped. She touched her face again. He felt the mark burning. And then, for the first time in years, she felt something she swore never to feel again after her husband's death. Absolute helplessness. Have you ever seen silence teach more than screaming? If so, leave it there in the comments how it went. Margaret took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3. His face was still burning. The humiliation weighed more than the physical pain. But something inside her refused to fall apart completely. She lifted her chin. Slowly. Steadfast. He looked at Dawson, not angrily, but with something deeper. Disappointment. Disappointment with the uniform, with the man, with the world that allowed that. Dawson expected screams. I expected tears. I expected her to beg or bow. But Margaret did something he didn't expect. She was silent. Not the silence of fear, the silence of choice. Margaret knew this instinctively. Charles always said, "Maggie, uncontrolled anger is fuel in the hands of the enemy." She remembered, and he held his own anger with both hands. Dawson frowned. Her silence bothered him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to justify what he had done. "Are you ignoring me now?" This is also contempt. Margaret did not answer. He just breathed. He stepped forward. "I talked to you." She blinked slowly. He looked at the ground, then back to him, and he said, in a low but firm voice, "I'm not going to react, officer. I won't give you what you want." The words came out calmer than she felt inside. Inside, the heart beat out of rhythm. His hands were sweating cold. His cheek throbbed. But outside, it was pure control. She closed her eyes for a moment. He saw Charles' face. She saw her son, Steven, in some distant practice, repeating movements with silent precision. He saw that true strength never needed to scream. He opened his eyes again. Dawson laughed, but it was a nervous laugh now. "Do you think you're smart? Do you think staying silent will save you?" Margaret grasped the strap of her purse firmly. "I'm not trying to save myself, officer. I'm trying not to get lost." The phrase fell like a stone in still water. Dawson stopped. Soothed. He didn't fully understand, but he felt the weight. He looked around again. 2 people were still watching from afar. One of them took her cell phone. He saw it, and something changed on his face. Discomfort. Small, but visible. Margaret stepped aside, slow, controlled. She didn't run. He did not bow down. He did not beg. She just moved, as if deciding that she will no longer occupy the space of shame that they tried to put in her. Dawson stood still, holding the radio, the hand tensioned in the belt. The wind passed between the cars. Plastic bags flew across the floor. The sound of a distant engine breaking the silence, and Margaret, with the red mark still on her face, kept her dignity intact. Self-control is not weakness. It is the only force that abuse cannot steal. A woman approached, gray hair, reading glasses hanging around his neck, shopping bag in hand. She stopped a few meters from Margaret. He looked at her face. He saw the red mark. He frowned. Then he looked at Dawson. "Officer, is everything okay here?" Dawson turned sharply. "Walk away, ma'am. This is none of your business." The woman did not move. "It seems that it is, yes." She looked at Margaret again. Slow recognition in the eyes. "Wait, I know you." Margaret blinked, surprised. "I don't think so. No, I do. You're Steven's mother, aren't you?" The name fell into the air like silent thunder. Dawson stopped. He turned his head. "Steven who?" The woman smiled slightly, but without joy. "Steven Seagal. Actor. Martial artist. Didn't you know?" Dawson's face changed. First confusion, then disbelief, then something more dangerous. Fear disguised as irritation. "Are you making this up to intimidate me?" The woman shook her head. "I don't need to invent anything. She is his mother. Yes, I saw the 2 of them together a few times at the market. He's very discreet, but everyone around here knows." Margaret said nothing. He just lowered his gaze. She never wanted to use her son's name like that. Never. But now, it was in the air, and she couldn't turn it off. Dawson took a step back. Slow, deliberate. He looked at Margaret again, this time with different eyes, no longer as an invisible old woman, but as someone who could cost him a lot more than he imagined. That doesn't change anything." She resisted. "I saw it." The woman crossed her arms. "I saw it too, and what I saw was you hitting her." Dawson opened his mouth. Closed. It opened again. She reacted first. He didn't react. No. I was there. Another person approached. A middle-aged man, baseball cap, keys in hand. "I saw it too. You hit her out of nowhere, man." Dawson felt the ground disappear from under his feet. Margaret was still silent, but something has changed inside her. It was not relief. It was not victory. It was just the slow awareness that maybe, just maybe, the truth still had some weight. She touched her face again. The physical pain had already subsided, but moral pain still throbbed. The woman took another step forward. "Where is your son now, Margaret?" Margaret hesitated. He was coming to pick me up. It should arrive at any moment. It was not a lie. Steven had called half an hour earlier. He said he would go to the market after an appointment. Dawson froze. Did he see that? The woman pointed to the other side of the parking lot. "I don't know, but that's his car over there, isn't it?" Everyone turned their heads. A black SUV was stopped about 50 meters away. Engine on, dark windows. No one could see who was inside, but the presence was unmistakable. Dawson felt the sweat running down his back. He looked at Margaret. For the woman. For the SUV. His hand trembled slightly on his belt. Margaret didn't look at the car. He looked only at Dawson, and she saw, for the first time, the fear on his face. The wind blew again, bags dangling on the floor, sound of distant portholes. The silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of helplessness. It was the silence before the storm. Never underestimate someone for what they look like, because you never know who's watching. And how would you react if you found out this too late? The door of the SUV opened, slowly. The sound of metal echoed in the parking lot as a warning. Dawson felt his stomach tighten. He saw a man leave, high, broad shoulders, controlled movements. Each step had weight. Steven Seagal. There was no hurry. There was no theater, just presence. He closed the car door. He looked around. He saw the small crowd around Margaret, and he saw her face, the red mark. Steven stopped 10 meters away. He said nothing. He just stared. He looked at his mother, then to Dawson, then back to her. Margaret felt the tears rise, but she didn't let them fall. She shook her head slightly, as if to say, "Don't do anything you'll regret." Steven understood. He took a deep breath, but it didn't move. Dawson was getting into that mode now. Dawson took a step back, then another. He raised his hand slightly, as if trying to show that he was not a threat. But he was, and everyone there knew it. "Look, this was a misunderstanding. You reacted, Steven stepped forward. Only one. But the weight of that step silenced Dawson mid-sentence. "Did my mother react?" Steven's voice was low, calm, dangerous. Dawson swallowed. She hesitated to show the document. Protocol requires hitting an elderly woman in the face." Silence. Dawson looked down at the floor, to the sides, anywhere other than Steven. It was not so. Steven crossed his arms. So how was it? Margaret watched everything in silence. She knew her son. I knew his discipline, self-control. But he also knew the pain he carried when he saw injustice. Steven has never been one to blow up. But when it exploded, the silence was deafening before. She stepped forward. "Steven, never mind." He looked at her. His eyes softened for a second. "Mom, he hit you. I know, but I'm fine. You're not well. I'm seeing." Margaret touched her own face. He felt the mark still warm. She knew Steven was right, but he also knew that anger would not cure that. Steven turned his eyes to Dawson. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Dawson tried to regain his posture. "Look, I'm a law enforcement officer. I was doing my job. Work." Steven took a step closer. "Your job is to protect. Do not attack." Dawson retreated again. I can explain. It was a routine approach that... Routine? Steven pointed to his mother's face. "Is this routine for you?" Dawson did not respond. "I couldn't." The man next to him, wearing a cap, said, "Dude, you're screwed. Everyone saw it." The woman with glasses nodded. "I recorded part. It's here on my phone." Dawson felt the world come crashing down. He looked at the radio on his belt, for the badge on the chest, for the uniform that, suddenly, weighed like concrete. Steven didn't move any further. He just stood there, a few meters away, but the distance didn't matter. The moral weight had already crushed Dawson completely. Margaret saw the policeman's face change. He saw arrogance turn into shame. He saw power turn into panic. And he felt something strange. Not joy, but a deep sadness. Because she knew that this man had just destroyed his own life, and no one there could undo that. Justice appears even in silence, but its weight is never light, neither for the receiver nor for the beholder. Steven took a deep breath. He looked at his mother again. He saw the silent strength in her eyes. He also saw exhaustion, the pain she tried to hide. He knew he could break Dawson right then and there. He knew he had the power, the ability, the moral justification. But I also knew that violence only begets more violence. And his mother didn't deserve to see that. "Mom, come here." Margaret walked up to him, slowly, every step heavy. Steven held her arm carefully. He looked at his face closely. The mark was darker now. He closed his eyes for a second, breathed, controlled. When he opened his eyes again, there was no anger. There was something deeper, disappointment. He looked at Dawson. "You know what you just did, don't you?" Dawson tried to speak, but his voice failed. Steven continued, "You didn't just hit her. You beat up all the mothers who raised children believing that the world would be fair. You have tapped into the confidence of those who believe that a uniform means protection." The words fell heavy, accurate. Dawson lowered his head. Margaret touched her son's arm. "Steven, he will pay for what he did, but I don't want you to carry anger about it." Steven looked at her, surprised. "Mom, he hurt you. I know, but anger will only hurt you." She looked at Dawson, not with hatred, with something he didn't expect. Feather. Margaret was making that choice now, not out of weakness, by force. Dawson raised his face slowly. He saw Margaret looking at him. No anger, no revenge, and that hurt more than any scream, because he saw, in that look, everything he never was, and maybe never would be. Dignity, control, humanity. He felt something break inside him. Not just pride, something deeper, the illusion that power and respect were the same thing. Steven stepped forward. "You'll have to answer for that. Legally, morally, in any case." Dawson nodded, hands shaking. I know. But before that," Steven pointed to Margaret, "you're going to look at her and tell her the truth." Dawson hesitated. "The truth?" "The truth. Why did you hit her? Really?" Heavy silence. Dawson looked at Margaret, to the ground, into their own hands. And then, for the first time, he said something real. Because I could." The sentence came out low, broken. Margaret closed her eyes. He took a deep breath. Steven just nodded. "At least you admitted that." The parking lot around it was still alive. Cars coming in and out, people passing by with bags. But there, in that small circle of people, time had stopped. Dawson lowered his head completely. His shoulders slumped. The radio on the belt seemed to weigh tons. Margaret held her son's hand. He squeezed lightly. Steven looked at her, and he understood. She was saying, "Enough. He already understands." And Steven, out of respect for his mother, stopped. The wind blew again. Dry leaves rolled across the asphalt, and Dawson, still standing, was already down. Overcoming oneself is the greatest battle, and sometimes witnessing someone's defeat is more painful than winning. Would you have forgiven? Or would he have let his anger speak louder? Leave your answer in the comments, because this choice says more about us than about who hurts us. Steven helped his mother into the SUV. He held the door open as she settled into the seat. He adjusted the seatbelt for her. He closed the door slowly. Margaret looked out the window. He saw Dawson still standing there, head down, hands in pockets. She felt no victory. He felt no relief, just tiredness. Steven got in the car. He started the engine. He looked at his mother. "Do you want to go to the hospital? Check if everything is okay?" Margaret shook her head. "No, you don't have to. I just want to go home." Steven hesitated. "Mom." Steven, please, just take me home. He took a deep breath, nodded. The car slowly left the parking lot. On the way, Margaret looked out the window. The streets of Glendale passed slowly. Known houses, trees she had seen for years. Everything is the same. Everything is different. Steven drove in silence, but she felt the tension in his shoulders. You're angry, aren't you? He glanced at her. I am. From me. No, never from you. Margaret sighed. He missed Steven, but he is also human. Steven squeezed the steering wheel. Being human does not justify beating a defenseless elderly woman. I know, but carrying hatred for him won't heal what he did. She touched her own face. The brand was still there, but the physical pain was almost gone. Moral pain would take longer. They arrived at Margaret's house, a small, white house with a wooden balcony and flowers at the entrance. Simple, cozy. Steven turned off the engine. He sat for a moment. I should have arrived earlier. Margaret looked at him. You arrived at the right time. I didn't arrive. No. If I had arrived earlier. First what? Were you going to stop it? She shook her head. This happened because it had to happen, and I survived. I'm here. Steven looked at his own hands. I've spent my whole life teaching control, discipline, respect, and yet, there are still people who do that. Margaret put her hand on his. You taught, and someone will learn. It just won't be today. And maybe it's not with him. Steven closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He remembered all the training, all the movies. Every time he preached about honor, about justice, about control. And he realized that the hardest lesson wasn't teaching. It was accepting that not everyone was ready to learn, but his mother was. It always has been. She didn't need revenge. He needed peace. And he, as a son, needed to respect that. Margaret opened the car door. Are you going in? I made lemonade yesterday. Steven smiled for the first time since he arrived in the parking lot. Of course, Mom. They entered the house together. The door closed behind them. Inside, natural light poured in through the windows. Smell of cleanliness, photos on the walls. Simple but complete life. Margaret went to the kitchen. He took 2 glasses. He served the lemonade. Steven sat down at the table. He looked around. Everything is so familiar, so safe. She put the glass in front of him. Thank you for coming. I'll always come, Mom. Always. She smiled, a tired but real smile. I know. They drank in silence. The lemonade was cold, sweet in the right measure. Outside, the sound of children playing in the street, a dog barking, a car passing slowly, life going on. Margaret looked out the kitchen window. He saw the blue sky, cloudless, just like in the morning. But now, somehow, cleaner. She touched her face again. The mark was beginning to disappear, and she knew that, over time, the memory would also become lighter. Not because she would forget, but because she had chosen not to carry the weight alone. Every wound can turn into wisdom, but only if you choose to heal, not bleed forever. 3 days later, the story leaked. Not because Steven wanted to, not because Margaret asked for it, but because the woman with the glasses, the one in the parking lot, posted the video. 63 seconds of shaky footage, badly framed, but clear enough. Dawson raising his hand, the slap, Margaret staggering, the mark on the face, and then Steven arriving. The video exploded. In 24 hours, it had 3 million views. In 48, it exceeded 10. Comments by the thousands, bulk shares. It wasn't just about Margaret. It wasn't just about Steven. It was about all the Margarets that no one saw, all the Dawsons that no one stopped. People finally had a face for the injustice they had always known existed, and they were furious. Comments came from everywhere. This happens every day. The difference is that this time someone filmed it. My grandmother went through something similar. Nobody believed her. If it wasn't for Steven Seagal, this would go unpunished. Think about it. Respect for the elderly should be sacred law. That's disgusting. Behavioral experts began to comment. A psychologist posted a video analyzing Dawson's body language. He pointed out the classic signs of abuse of power: invasion of personal space, unnecessary verbal escalation, use of force against someone visibly defenseless. A civil rights lawyer wrote an article explaining how elderly people are frequent targets of assaults in public spaces, and how most cases never make it to court because victims are afraid to report it. A former police officer recorded a statement saying, "This behavior embarrasses the uniform." Dawson does not represent the police. He represents everything we are trying to change. Public pressure grew. Glendale police have been forced to open an internal investigation. Dawson was removed. His name has become synonymous with abuse. And Margaret, the woman who just wanted to go home, became a symbol. Margaret saw it all on television. Sitting in the living room, with a cup of tea in her hands, she watched her own face on the screen. Steven was next to her. "Are you okay with that?" She took a long time to respond. "I don't know. I never wanted to be famous." "You're not famous, Mom. You are important. It's different." Margaret looked at him. "But now everyone is going to look at me differently." "No. They will look at you. Is that it? And maybe that's what we've always needed." She took a deep breath. She thought about his words, and he realized that he was right. She didn't ask for that. But maybe, in some strange way, it needed to happen. Not for her, but for all the others that no one sees. Margaret's phone rang. She answered. She was a journalist. "Mrs. Campbell, I would like to speak to you about the incident, about how you feel." Margaret hesitated. Steven motioned for her to hang up, but she raised her hand. "How do I feel?" She paused. "I feel tired, but also hopeful." "Hopeful?" "Yes, because if this serves to make fewer people go through what I went through, then it was worth it." The journalist was silent for a moment. "You are very brave. I'm not brave. I'm just too old to pretend it doesn't matter." Margaret hung up the phone. He looked out the window. He saw a reporter's car parked in front of the house. Sighed. Steven touched her shoulder. "Do you want me to send them away?" "No. Q. They will leave when they realize that there is no more history here." She stood up. He picked up the empty cup. He went to the kitchen. He came back with another full cup. He sat down again, and he continued to live, because that's what she's always done, and that was what she would continue to do. Good inspires more than fear, and sometimes a story changes the world, not because it screamed at you, but because it was finally heard. Share this story, not by likes, but because someone needs to remember that respect is not optional. It is essential. And if you've made it this far, leave your comment. What would you do if you saw something like this happening in front of you? 6 months later, Margaret kept going to the same supermarket, Tuesdays and Fridays, always. She pushed the cart slowly. I chose the same things: wholemeal bread, skimmed milk, seasonal fruits. But something had changed. People recognized her now, not with fanfare, not with invasion, with silent respect. A young man held the door for her at the entrance. "Good morning, ma'am." Margaret smiled. "Good morning." He hesitated. Then he said quietly, "My grandmother saw you on TV. He said that you are strong." Margaret felt her chest tighten. "Tell her I'm just an ordinary person, like her." The boy nodded, smiled. He continued on his way. Margaret kept walking. In the dairy aisle, a woman approached. "Sorry to bother. I just wanted to say thanks." Margaret blinked, surprised. "Thank you, why?" "For not being silent. My mother went through something similar. Nobody believed it. To see you talking about it helped her to speak as well." Margaret took hold of the woman's hand. "I hope she's okay." "It's better now. Thanks to people like you." The woman walked away. Margaret stood still for a moment. He took a deep breath. He felt the weight, but also the lightness. At the cashier, the attendant smiled when she saw her. "Hi, Mrs. Campbell. How are you today?" "Everything, dear. What about you?" "Well, too." The girl lowered her voice. "My brother is a police officer. He saw the video. He said they used it at his training academy, as an example of what not to do." Margaret nodded slowly. I hope it helps. It helped. He said he will never forget it. Margaret paid for the groceries. He took the bags. It has left the market. And there, in the parking lot, the same parking lot, she stopped. He looked around. The sun beat down the same. Cars came and went. Children laughing. Engines starting. Everything is the same. But it wasn't. Margaret closed her eyes for a second. He remembered the slap. Of pain. Of fear. But he also remembered what came after. Steven arriving. People supporting. The world listening. She did not choose to be a symbol, but he accepted to be an example. And he realized that perhaps this was the difference between victim and survivor. Don't deny the pain, but don't let it define the rest. Steven appeared again. He came to pick her up every Friday now. Ready, Mom? Always. They walked together to the car. He helped with the bags. Before entering, Margaret looked back one last time. He saw an elderly woman crossing the parking lot. Alone. Heavy cart. He saw a policeman standing near the entrance. He saw the old woman. He walked to her. Margaret held her breath. The policeman smiled. Kind. Do you need help, ma'am? The old woman hesitated. Then he accepted. He helped carry the bags to her car. Margaret smiled. Tears flowed. But this time, of relief. Steven saw it too. See? Changed. Not everything. But a little. A little is already a lot. Mom. They got into the car. The engine started. The low music played on the radio. Margaret looked out the window as they left. The parking lot was left behind, but memory does not, and she was okay with that. Because some memories are not to forget. They are to remember how much we survived. The car turned the corner. The sun was shining brightly. The sky, clear blue. Margaret took a deep breath, and he felt, for the first time in months, that he was really well. Screen dimmed slowly. Sound of gentle breathing. True strength does not scream. She just refuses to disappear. If this story touched you, leave your like now, because stories like this need to be seen. Comment on what you would do if you saw something like this happening. Your answer matters. It can inspire someone to take action. Share this video, not by me, but for all the Margarets the world hasn't seen yet. And subscribe to the channel, because as long as there are real stories of transformation, of dignity, of silent respect, I'll keep telling you. The world needs more stories like this, and you've just been part of one of them.